Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's webinar on missing. My name's Rachel Swain and I'm the Business Manager for Solihull Safeguarding Adults Board. This session is being delivered by West Midlands Police and is part of a series of webinars on the theme of exploitation. Although Locate are delivering this presentation this morning to explain their role with those who go missing, just a reminder to everyone that we all have a role in supporting individuals who go missing and trying to understand why this has happened, as there will be lots of reasons why. Just a quick reminder to everyone that we have the all-age exploitation procedures in Solihull, as well as safeguarding adults and safeguarding children procedures. So please familiarise yourself with the procedures that are relevant to your role. You can find all of those on the Safeguarding Adult Board and local Safeguarding Children Partnership website, and I'll put the link to that in the chat just if anyone isn't aware of that. And just a reminder, anyone who is here who works with those under 18, that there is also the new multi-agency procedures for missing from home, care and other settings that are being launched this Thursday. Quick reminder in terms of housekeeping, I think most people are familiar with this now, but please keep yourselves on mute so we don't have the background noise. We are recording the session, so we will be sharing the link excuse me, to the recording shortly after the session with you all. If you want to ask a question, there will be some time at the end of the presentation, so you can either put that in the chat or we can take sort of hands up at the end of the session. Okay, so I'm now pleased to welcome Mark Nevitt, the Locate Manager from West Midlands Police. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Rachel. And I do apologise first if anybody attending the missing launch on Thursday. This is pretty much going to be the same presentation that I'm going to do then, but I think it covers the whole of missing and what I'm trying to achieve and trying to get across today to understand the role of Locate. What I will attempt to do, and my technical ability is very limited, trust me, is I'm going to try and share my screen now just to share a desk presentation. So hopefully, has that come up? Can people see that? It
has, yeah, that's come up.
Brilliant. That's a good start. So I will go through this today. So a little bit about me. Obviously, I'm Mark Nevitt. I'm the team manager for what's called Locate at West Midlands Police, and I'll discuss the setup of Locate. I'm a former police officer, having retired in 2015, and then came back a couple of years ago to manage what's called the intervention prevention side of Locate. And my job predominantly, although I do cover investigations like I'm doing today, I predominantly do all the partnership working around missing people, that's children and adults, and look at themes and ways that we can manage and prevent missing people. We'll do all the strategy discussions for children. My team also do what's called triage. So we will triage with every local authority, every under 18-year-old that goes missing overnight, both from both look at found and missing, and discuss those on a daily basis with each local authority. Albeit, I think Solihull at the moment we only do it twice a week. But the idea is to keep track of what's happening around, particularly around missing young people and those vulnerable people that actually cross our back doors on a regular basis. So that's a bit about me. Just to give you the sort of context of Locate and understand Locate. Okay, next slide. So the historical context of Locate is historically, even when I joined the police back in 1986, many years ago, police were all missing people were always managed by a uniform response, and it was a function that you just went out and did. You take the missing report. Missing report would get passed from shift to shift. There was no real ownership of missing because basically it was being passed to a different officer on a daily basis and per shift. So no great ownership of missing. Caused one or two headaches realistically about who would do the long-term strategies around it, and it was real difficult for partnership working. So what we do now is actually do it in a different format. We have Locate that came into being, and we run it through our daily Thrive review meeting, which is called TRM. So in the times of austerity, public services were stretched, increased focus of policing, and more around the wider vulnerability. We started to see county lines, modern day slavery, child exploitation, drug dealing. We needed a new approach around missing and make it look a bit different and make it a bit more manageable, a bit more accountable to officers within West Midlands Police. Locate was formed in 2017. We actually come under the establishment of Force CID, and I'll go through what the hierarchy of that is shortly. But it wasn't just a concept that was thought up overnight and just put into place. It was established after a period of review, looked at the Force Changes programme, academic study, and the psychology department at University of Liverpool were also involved. And actually, we are seen now as one of the benchmarks across the country for managing missing between the forces. And we do get quite regular, contact from other forces come to see how we do things and how we manage missing, because we are seen as one of the leads across the country in managing the process. So just to give you an idea then what it looks like, West Midlands people missing persons process. All investigations commence in the Force Contact Department. And just to give you an idea what that looks like, in the calendar year for 2021, I did the figures yesterday, there were 13,470 missing investigations. That's 13,470 people that were reported missing, albeit some of those are repeat victims or repeat people that are going missing. But those are the number of missing records that were created during 2021, and that's the calendar year. There were 923 of those investigations are high-risk investigations during that same period. And what's really, I've got 4 high-risk runners today, and that will take a massive drain on resources because you have to really focus on those individuals. And I'll go through what high-risk, what the terminology high-risk means. But today it'll be I've got 14 officers on, 10 across the side of the force, and 4 across the western side of the force, and 3 DSs on. To manage 4 high risk and to manage the other 28 people missing is a real difficult process, because you can't forget the other 24 that are there, but actually all your resources are going to be looking for those top 4 people that are missing, which on today are, if I remember rightly, 2 are adults and 2 are missing children. To give you an idea of what Solihull missing like is, last year in Solihull, 4,554 adults were missing in the 21 period, and 4,554 adults were missing. 205 were actually missing in Solihull over the last 12 months, and 830 of those were high. And actually, Solihull last year had 71 high-risk missing adults. So once the investigation come in, if it's deemed missing, a force response resource is dispatched. A primary investigation is commenced.
I'm in there, thanks.
Sorry, some talking there.
I think someone's forgotten to mute. Just a reminder, everyone, just to keep yourselves on mute.
So obviously that investigation comes in, and the first people that do attend that mission report is force response. So it's still uniform driven at the very front end when that call comes in. That investigation will be an appropriate review to identify the correct level of risk. So we tend to have low risk, medium risk, high risk, and there's actually a category from no apparent risk, which we don't tend to use as a force, albeit we do get 1 or 2 reports a month actually recorded as no apparent risk. It's my job as a gatekeeper to review those to make sure that there's any risk involved. And whereas I have done with one recently, is resurrect that into a full missing report, and is now a high risk person. Once it has been reviewed, the investigation is converted onto compact. The missing person system is reviewed by a force response supervisor, and that's a sergeant and generally inspector. And actually, once that primary investigation is done and reached the required standard, it's at that point in time there will be a peer-to-peer review process with Locate. We will take that investigation on, review what's actually been done, and if we're happy, the investigation is then progressed by Locate. But again, there is a backstop there. So although it's been seen by a sergeant, it's been seen by an inspector, as soon as that investigation will come into Locate, we then own it. So what we'll make sure is that as soon as we pick it up, it's reviewed again by a sergeant and reviewed again by an inspector, depending on the level of risk fairly soon afterwards, just to make sure that we're happy that everything's been done And actually, we have some more tactics that we might use within Locate to try and locate that person, and we'll start managing that process. If we do determine straight away from phone work or whatever work we're doing that person has certainly gone out of West Midlands Police and maybe somewhere else in the country, one of the people we've got missing today is potentially in Folkestone, we'll make sure that we've got all available information that we've got with approximate locations of where they are, and then we'll approach that relevant force and ask them to take on board that MISPA, because the missing proof of professional practice will say that whoever has got...
Sorry, Mark, you broke up a bit there. I don't...
Sorry, I'm listening. Go on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mark.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, I'll carry on. So that's what happens if anybody that from our force area goes missing and is somewhere else. I'm not going to go through this slide because it's fairly complicated, but it'll give you an idea of how that missing process then works. So missing person, that initial report comes in. Every person that goes missing, whoever reports them, is subject to 12 questions and ask all the background of that relevant person. So actually that informs the risk assessment of that individual. So when we go starting from the off, we can understand what the risk is, any potential harm they may come to, and the background of that individual. So we know what we're dealing with from the offset. That then will be graded as a P1 or a P2. Now P1 will be somebody that's high risk, somebody that may be a child that's county lines, or maybe a real young child that's gone missing. It may be a vulnerable adult, may have dementia, something like that, Alzheimer's. But we have real concerns with from the off that we need to put a significant number of resources in to try and find that person straight away. And that'll be led and done by a response, sometimes very much with the assistance locate. So obviously it's been graded as a P1, it's been graded as a P2. It goes out then to force response, it goes out to the uniform officers, commence a primary investigation that I've talked about. It talks about there where there's no apparent risk and it's what's called the PAs. That means it'd be classed as very, very low level and actually be picked up further down the line because there's no risk around that individual and could be actually not visited actually for 3 days later. Obviously, there's a management then review of the primary investigation, and that's transferred to locate, as I said previously, and that's where we start that secondary investigation. That record's transferred to us, and we do all that investigation around it. In the background, it's my team. They've been missing. I know Solihull's changed their procedure slightly, but they've been missing more than 72 hours, or they go missing more than 3 times in 90 days, or in Solihull's respect to Solihull 24 hours. We will do a strategy discussion around that child and look at what measures, what intervention measures we can put in place as police, what other agencies can bring to the table and what they're doing in respect to that person. And then we look at the performance monitoring and we look at how we manage those return home interviews and those prevention interviews that are really, for me, are key about identifying the push and pull factors as to why a child or an adult may go missing. So what do the teams look like? Obviously, we're managed by a chief inspector who is Vicky Lee. She's the lead for West Midlands Police Locate. Sitting above her is a superintendent, but that superintendent will also have a number of other portfolios, not just missing. So obviously, Chief Inspector Vicky Lee is the main focus and the senior leadership team member for our team. Then we have a central team which consists of 3 teams who work 3 different shifts, and that's a detective inspector, 6 detective sergeants and 30 constables. So as you can gather, that's 2 sergeants and 10 constables per shift. On the western side, again, we have another detective inspector, 3 detective sergeants and 18 constables. So that's 1 detective sergeant, 6 constables per shift. That's a bit lower because of the demand on the western side is less. Intervention team, myself as a team manager, I've got 1 detective sergeant and 9 constables. And then we have an unresolved team or an inactive team, it's sometimes called. And that comes into place where we may have people who are long-term missing that we either can't locate. It's fair to say potentially some of those are homicides. It sometimes covers the asylum-seeking children that come into the country whereby they've gone missing for a long time. They've gone back into whether it's the Vietnamese community or Albanian community, and we can't tend to locate them. And we can't do any more inquiries around them. So go to an inactive unresolved team who will continue to progress that outside normal missing contact. And at the moment, I think there's probably about 260 people on that inactive, on that resolved missing contact data that we've got still in the force, going back as far as I think probably the 1950s, probably our oldest missing person from when they went missing, up until, and some of those may only be missing 4 or 5 weeks, but actually we've exhausted everything we can do from a front end capacity. Key features of Locate. So it locates, it has a dedicated intervention prevention department. That's my own team, working with key stakeholders to understand and reduce demand. There are 7 local social services authority within the West Midlands Police area. So we need to manage those relationships. And actually, when I first took over this role back in 2020, the actual relationships with local authorities were very ad hoc. We've got somebody firmly implanted within Birmingham, but Solihull and all those on the western side, we had a limited actually involvement with them. And what we've sought to do over the last 2 years is I've got now a single point of contact for every local authority, including Solihull. So there are an identified person that, if there are issues, they can be contacted directly, but it also allows us to manage demand on a geographical basis, with those officers doing triage with each local authority every morning. And again, that's predominantly children, but if there are adults concerned, we can bring them into that. And actually where there are escalations as well, where either the police, there's a concern around what the risk factor is, they can bring that to us and suggest that something might need to be high risk. And conversely, if I've got concerns around the way that a local authority is managing the child and the placements, then I can escalate that up again through the local authorities. So looked after children, LACs come to WMP from all over the country, reside in care homes. Again, and that's a real difficult one to manage. And I know that technically, as a local authority, you should be told when another child comes from another area to live within Solihull. I know that doesn't always happen, and it's quite frequent that we end up with children from all over the country appearing across West Midlands without the host local authorities knowing that they're even there until they start going missing. And that's quite a difficult one to manage, because you can tend to find that if they're from far afield, say they've come from Manchester, the potential is they're going to gravitate back to Manchester as soon as they go missing. Talked about persistent missing people. That's 3 episodes in 90 days. Again, managed by the IMP team, and we'll liaise with local authorities, public protection units, because some of those are going to be exploited, regional organised crime units where there's potential county lines, and neighbourhood policing units as well, because actually some of these people are going to be, on neighbourhoods. They are not just going to be missing, they may be involved in antisocial behaviour, there may be other issues. So actually we need to involve the neighbourhood policing unit to make sure that we've got not just a multi-agency approach, that everybody within West Midlands Police is playing their part. Outside of the IMP team, Locate operates a duty team which runs across 2 hubs, so say Western, say works out at Wednesfield, and Central, which covers Coventry, Solihull and Birmingham, and we work out at Chelmsley Wood. And we were on duty from 7 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the morning, 24/7, 365 days a year. So there was always a member of Locate on between the hours of 7 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the morning. After 3 o'clock in the morning, for those 4 hours, it is managed by response, and it's managed by a response inspector. It is fast-paced work. It's real difficult work, and we look now to take on more detective constables, because actually, although it's missing people, it is an investigation in the purest sense. And a lot of those methods we are employing to find missing people are those kinds of methods that we employ to find people who are actually wanted for serious offences. We have to use the same tactics, because some of these people that we're trying to find are high risk, and we need to find them as soon as possible. The teams have become pretty experienced and accustomed to dealing with the risk, and are well trained and versed in the requisite practical options. What we've also put in place this year is a LFO, which is a Locate Family Liaison Officer, whereby we might have somebody who's actually gone out and committed suicide, and we need actually to manage that family through the police process, the coronial process, and actually provide them the support that they need while that person is missing, if we think they're going to commit suicide, and post that period where that, you know, unfortunately might find they have done that. And actually the background to that LFO being put in place was a result of unfortunately a 16-year-old that died in Solihull, and we recognised then by managing that family that we needed to manage that family really effectively and better. And actually from the learnings of that, we've now got a fully trained family liaison officer or locate family officer that manages these circumstances for us when we do unfortunately find somebody that is deceased. Just to give you an idea what the definition of missing is, it's anyone whose whereabouts cannot be established will be considered as missing until located and their well-being or otherwise confirmed. I raise that because some of you may well be involved with placements, care homes, and what we do tend to get a lot of, particularly around repeat missing, is whereby somebody goes missing from a placement or hasn't returned from their curfew, and the placement will say, we think he's at his girlfriend's, or we think she's at a boyfriend's, or she's at a friend's house, and actually they're probably not missing. And actually there is a requirement under the regional safeguarding procedures that a carer must then do their own inquiries to try and trace and find that missing person. That's stipulated with that guidance. And actually they shouldn't really be reporting people missing until they've done those basic inquiries. It is a problem for us because we do get a lot of reports from supported accommodation providers who, when I did some research last year, the majority of our under 18 missing, 2/3 of them were reported missing by placements that were supported accommodation, pretty much around the fact that they hadn't returned within their curfew time. So just bear that in mind, supported accommodation can be a massive driver for West Midlands Police in respect of missing, but actually we need to make sure that person is missing or report them, because we start deploying extensive police resources into it. So all reports of missing persons sit with a continuum of risk, no apparent risk, which is the old absent, if you remember that, through to high risk cases that require immediate and intensive action. Why do people go missing? The authorised professional practice gives 4 reasons as to why somebody might go missing, and that's their motor is lost or temporarily disorientated. You know, we do find people that are, you know, have wandered off and got themselves into woods or areas where they can't find themselves out of. Somebody has lost control of it, has control of their actions, and is voluntarily missing, having decided a course of action. And you do get that where people actually, through their family life, through their own issues, or live a transient lifestyle, well, actually, they just float from place to place, and they don't even realise they're missing half the time. But yet, family, loved ones haven't seen them for a long time and will report them missing. Missing due to care or due to an accident, injury, or illness, i.e. dementia, Alzheimer's. I will talk about the Herbert protocol that we've got in place a bit further on. But again, we have quite a number of people that suffer from dementia, Alzheimer's, that do go missing, who again are potentially high risk from the off because they don't know where they are and can literally end up anywhere in the country. And then the further one is the county lines children, the sexually exploited children and adults whereby they may be under influence of a third party and be subject to exploitation. And some real risk around county lines that's out there at the moment. You know, we know that it happens across the country. We've got many children that turn up in other locations. You know, we even had a young 15-year-old girl that was found in a hotel room only last week, where there was drug paraphernalia, gas canisters, alcohol, and she'd clearly been sexually exploited over a couple of days. So we have to manage that risk on a daily basis. Risk assessment. So low risk is the risk of harm to the subject or the public is assessed as possible but minimal. Medium risk is the risk of harm to the subject to the public assessed as likely but not serious. And high risk is the risk of serious harm to the suspect or the public is assessed as very likely. So we're not just looking at the risk to that individual. There may be people out there that go missing. I think there's one on the news yesterday from one of the other forces whereby they've got somebody who's gone missing from prison. There was a potential risk to other people. Technically, they're absconded and they're wanted. But actually, there are people that sometimes leave in mental health settings. that do present a risk to other people, or that they've gone missing in circumstances where they may present a risk to other people. And that's something, again, that forms part of our risk assessment. Is everybody with me so far?
Yes, we are, Mark.
I'll take that as a yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
So
I
if you-
think some council colleagues are having some sound issues. We've got widespread connection problems this morning.
Okay, I mean, I'll stay on at the end for any questions anyway. So, but if you do need to stop me, please just do. So I talked about earlier about 12 questions. Now, if you're in the process of reporting missing, just be prepared for those 12 questions, because the most information that you can give us during those 12 questions will actually start to lead that investigation. So, and I'll just put those 12 questions there on there, and I can share this presentation. So, is this significantly out of character? Have they done this before? That is really crucial around the level of risk. We know that somebody's gone missing, and there are people on our boards that have gone missing 70, 80, 90 times. But actually, that's probably part of their lifestyle. They probably do go missing. We probably know where they are. It probably lowers the level of risk. If it's somebody that's never been missing before, and they've had a significant life event whereby, you know, they've got major financial issues, or, you know, drug or alcohol issues, that could be a real concern and a real indicator of the fact that they've never been missing before. So, have you been in contact with a person? Do you know their whereabouts, and is there a time when you expect them back? Actually, some people are reported missing 2 or 3 hours after they've gone, but actually, it might be the fact that they are just not aware of what the time is, don't realise how long they've been. So actually, again, it's about, do we know their whereabouts, and do we have a time when we expect them to back? Do you know their intended actions? When were they last seen? Have you done anything to locate them? Do you know who they're with? Who the last people that they were seen with? Where were they heading to? Where did they say they were going? Is this person a danger to themselves or others? Real crucial piece of information. You know, is there any risks? As you know, previously self-harmed? We need to know all that kind of information. Does the person have any specific medical needs? Do they have their medication? Is there a care plan in place? Again, that's pretty much if they go missing from medical setting. But again, there are people that go missing who are diabetic or need other forms of medication that they've not got access to while they're missing. Is the person like to self-harm or commit suicide? Normally there'll be indicators before they do go missing. They might have left a note. They might have, you know, expressed some suicidal thoughts before they go missing. We need to know what they've said. You know, and any potential locations that they might go to that might be significant to that individual. Is the person likely to be subject to a crime or harm? We've got many, I wouldn't say just children, but adults as well, that are CSE risk, that are CCE risk, that we have real concerns about from the offset. You know, and those tend to be high risk. And if I look at the ones we've got high risk at the moment, 2 out of 4, there are a CSE risk and CSE concern area, and that's why they're at a high risk. Is this person a victim of abuse or at risk of exploitation? Just because they haven't been exploited before, it doesn't mean that they're not. And we have to bear that in mind when we've got any child or any adult missing. Is that a factor in their missing episode? Is this person being looked after by an adult or children's services? Yeah, again, we really need to know that, and actually by which local authority, because if you've got a local authority, Manchester, that's placed somebody in Solihull, we need to know that that child's from Manchester, because that's probably where they're going, and that's probably where all their previous history is and all their previous information is. So again, we need to know which local authority is the parent authority and which is the host authority. Prior to this report, was the person displaying any behaviours or actions you consider to be out of the ordinary? Again, of course, concern. That speaks for itself. And are there any specific concerns you can offer or any other information? So just be prepared for those questions. If you are somebody that reports, you know, a social worker or a care home, and you do report people missing, just make sure that they're prepared for those questions and they've got those answers. I talked about Thrive when I did the very start of this presentation 10-15 minutes ago. And what does Thrive mean? And that's what it actually means is down the left-hand side, and that's where we assess the risk and threat to an individual. So a threat is communicated or perceived intent to inflict harm or loss to another person. H is for harm, and is to do or cause harm, e.g. injure or damage or hurt, physical or psychological, another person. Risk is the likelihood of an event occurring. Are they likely to go and harm themselves, or likely to hurt other people? Investigation is the active process examining, for us, and it says crime there, examining that missing person event and establishing why they've gone missing, where potentially they are. Vulnerability, again, I've talked about that, is what are the vulnerabilities around that individual, CCE, CSE, dementia, medical, risk, and consider that. Engagement is actually who can we engage with, who is it best to speak to. If it's a looked after child, which local authority, what possession of information do they have, what information does the patient have. And then you've got the prevention intervention, and that's where, again, my team sit to look at what opportunities are available once they have gone missing to try and stop them going missing again. Nice little pictures for you there, and that really is our tactical options for high risk, and not just high risk people, but for missing people in general. And if I start with the helicopter, obviously we've got MPAS. MPAS was up last night looking for somebody who was potentially at risk, potentially would like to take their own lives, and we knew that they'd gone into a wooded area, so we put the helicopter up. That is going to be our best means of trying to locate somebody when the light's starting to dim or they're in a wooded area. The next picture along is obviously we've got our own dedicated pulsar search teams. Again, they can go into wooded areas. Again, when we think there's a person in a specific location, they're hard to reach, we can't find them ourselves as locate, we'll actually deploy a specifically trained team into that area, and that can be a vast area, up to 2 or 3 miles, where we need to break it down into sections and physically search those areas using staff. Helicopters are always a bit expensive to put up, so we also have the technical ability to put drones up. Again, really effective. They have resulted in quite a number of people being found, and a real effective resource that we can deploy fairly quickly. If I go below that, mobile telephones, again, really, if you're social workers, if you have adults or children in your care, is if they're on social media, what's their name on social media, what social media accounts are they on. Telephone work is crucial for us. We can get a lot of information back from telephones, not just from the billing, who they've been in contact with, cell sites to the exact locations where they might be. And it's a real start for 10 for us. That gives proof of life. We know if they're continuing to use the phone, we know who they're using the phone to. It can pinpoint in areas to where they may well be located. CCTV speaks for itself. When we do have people going missing, if we've got no idea as to where they've gone, they haven't got really any track their assets, we'll start at point A from where they've gone missing from and start to explore what CCTV opportunities there are as we move away from their area. And that might be down to ring doorbells, CCTV cameras on houses, local authority CCTV, business CCTV, and we'll start to progress that and widen that out as we go. Next one is news. Social media is brilliant. You probably all see now on a regular basis, if you've got Facebook, that there are constant appeals that go out for missing people. Anybody that's high risk, we now put out there, and we only tend to put their first name, but we put them out on social media straight away, just so we can, see if any member of the public has seen them. And actually, that's not just in the West Midlands. If we think they've gone to another area, we can go to other forces, corporate comms, and actually get them to put out a press release. Financials, which is the little dollar sign next to it, another good source of trying to locate somebody is most people these days tend to use plastic, tend to use bank cards, or tend to withdraw cash from cash machines. Great source of information for us. We can contact the banks and ascertain exactly which shops they've used, which ATMs have used, and actually if those ATMs have also got cameras, we can actually ascertain that is them actually withdrawing money. So you can almost track somebody through their money to find out which location they're in. Passport, we can do border force, so we can make sure if find out somebody's left the country as and when. And then you've got obviously your computer work, so we know again, most people use computer for something. If you've registered online for something, that will be a central database that they might have your information, might have another mobile for you. And again, we use computers a lot to try and track people. And last but not least is people will use, particularly in county lines, will use trade networks. So we are well linked in with BTP around their CCTVs, around if we think somebody's travelling to a location, i.e. Cardiff on county lines, we know that they're probably going to come by train. We can alert BTP, we can do CCTV at the locations, i.e. at New Street and at Cardiff railway station to see if that person's got off, who they've met, have they got in any car at the stations. So we can do all those inquiries, but all those pictures there within that slide are tactics that we will use, aside covert tactics if we need to try and trace an individual that's not. And it depends on risk as to what tactics we will use. Role of the intervention and prevention team, where my team sit. So that's the delivery of intervention and prevention strategies to prevent missing episodes through a multi-agency partnership approach. To develop and maintain engagement links with partners internally and externally. So actually, what we try and do here is, we get a lot of information from the local authorities. We sometimes get a lot of information around placements. That sort of sits and zones by locate. But what we'll do now is a lot of MPUs will have a regular weekly or fortnightly missing meeting. We will make sure that everything we possess, the MPU are aware of, and actually the MPUs can actually assist in reducing, preventing that missing episode, or manage some place-based demand. We'll get them involved and start doing that. So we're well switched on within West Midlands Police to manage not just local place-based demand, but to manage if there's county lines risk, if there's gang affiliation, if there's, they're getting out of area and managing, taking drugs. We've got Rocker, we've got everybody involved that we can all sit around the table and discuss what we do as an organisation and actually feed that back into our partners. Create a triage-based approach with partners to manage threat, risk and harm, which I talked about earlier. That's reviewing every child that goes missing in previous 24 hours. Identify and refer those of child exploitation and share information to maximise investigation and safeguarding opportunities. One of the things we've just done there, and the referral we've just done, is St Giles. They have lived experience workers. We have a 16-year-old in another local authority that is being exploited, that is massively part of that gang affiliation, that gang culture. He is now subject to dolls and in a secure accommodation. And rather than just leaving there and doing nothing, we've actually asked for St Giles to go in, put lived experience work in, trying to start work with that individual, because actually they've probably got some common ground there. They can probably understand is what they've done in their life, the impact that it's had on them, and actually start to feed that into an individual to try and work with them. And I think when you've got somebody like that, it provides better opportunities. So reduce place-based demand on NPUs by reducing the number of repeat missing children who are under 18 through a partnership approach. We have got Philomena protocol there, and so I can go on to discuss if we need to, but Philomena has never really got off ground in West Midlands Police. It's a protocol that came out of Durham 2 or 3 years ago, who only have 2 local authorities, and is aimed at local authority children's homes, not supported accommodation. Most of our missing demand within West Midlands Police sits with a supported accommodation, and it's a little bit difficult to put the Philomena protocol into private businesses. So that's why we've never really got off ground with it, although it does remain a consideration. Identify and reduce missing episodes of vulnerable adults through joint working, which is track, triage and prevent, which I'll talk about shortly, and the Herbert protocol. The Herbert protocol is very much aimed at people who have dementia and Alzheimer's, and the idea is there, if they are going missing on a regular basis or have gone missing, and to prevent them going missing before, is there's a form that you can go on the West Midlands Police website, you can download yourselves, and that gives you opportunity to put every bit of information you possessed around your loved one, or if they're in a residential placement, for the placement to put every bit of information that we know about them, what the medication is, what their medical conditions are, where they previously lived, next of kin, where they're likely to gravitate to. So when they do go missing, please turn up. We can literally hand that piece of paper over straight away and say, this is the individual. And actually, because we've got all that information in one place, we can start to do that investigation really timely and really quickly. It's a bit like a Philomena protocol, which is a similar type of thing, but actually, it gives a sense of security for their next of kin to know that it's there and we can start moving very quickly. But actually, it has really got leaps and bounds where we've actually found people quickly because of it. And what my team do now, I have a specific person who deals with adult missing. And if there is somebody that suffers from Alzheimer's or dementia, has gone missing on the first occasion and recovered them, my member of the team will be scanning the logs on a daily basis, identifying those people and making sure the families or the carers are aware of the Herbert protocol. And last but not least, to provide that single point of contact, which is, I talked about earlier, it's worked really, really well. It's really, national best practice that we have got an individual member of staff sitting in my team that is the focal point for a local authority and a focal point for an MPU to bring all that information around missing together, and that's both children and adults. Exploitation, just some of the things to sort of consider what exploitation is. It was one of the things I've asked us to look at and raise, is how does it affect young people and vulnerable adults? Well, like other forms of abuse and exploitation, and county-line exploitation, it can affect any child or young person, male or female, under the age of 18. And it is, we see both male and females being tracked moved up and down the country on a regular basis, supplying drugs or getting to an establishment and being held in a trap house and being held there for days, supplying drugs. And actually, that's where we have to work with other forces really closely, identify that risk, identify locations, and making sure that those forces are on those locations really quickly to try and pull these youngsters that have been exploited and get them out of the trap houses. And this can affect actually vulnerable adults over 18, and I'll talk about cuckooing a bit further down, but just because you go over 18, that doesn't mean that you're not vulnerable. That there are people that are brought into compact and put on compact whereby they are adults and they are still being exploited. It might be the fact that they were using county lines as a child. And I think the concern here is around when you get to 18-year-old is you'll drop off children's services, but that risk doesn't diminish. That risk is still there. Just because you become 18 one day, the day after, you're almost dropped by children's services and nobody manages that risk afterwards. And you're not so much seen as vulnerable and they don't get reported missing. That's the way I see it, and that's the way it feels. I'm not saying that's evidence in Solihull. Can involve force and enticement-based methods and compliance, and that can be accompanied by violence and threats. I do a lot of work around the Vietnamese missing and unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And last year we set up Operation Pin because we had, in the space of 3 weeks, a number of children who had managed to get themselves out of cannabis factories in the across the country and had been subject to some significant violence prior to getting away or after they got away. So it's about managing that process again. And actually, Matt and I'm working on a piece of work with the local authorities to try and understand the cultural needs of Vietnamese, because if we don't get that right, we'll put them in supported accommodation, put them in foster care, and then missing within 24 hours and back into that world of exploitation. It's typified by some form of power imbalance in favour of those perpetrating exploitation. So that can be age, that can be other factors around their ability to be going county lines. It can also be around some kind of exchange, like money for drugs or something like that. But there tends to be an imbalance and a bit of power over the other to make them to exploit them. And I suppose the last one I'll touch on there is, and which does affect adults, is Class A users being targeted so that gang can take over their homes, and it's called cuckooing. So some of these trap houses are 20, 25, 30-year-old males, females who are themselves drug addicts, who may be subject to a drugs debt, and actually they put children into their homes and start drug dealing from their homes and put them at risk. They have been arrested because that's where the drug dealing is taken from, but actually really taking advantage of them because they have a they have a need for drugs and using that need to use their locations. I talked about track, triage and prevent. It's something that's still fairly new, and again something that's fairly significant that we're trying within West Midlands Police. I'm really conscious that there is a legal obligation to manage children who are missing. There's a strategy discussions, the triage. it's all documented, and there's a fine path that you have to do to manage a child. That doesn't happen with adults, and adults don't have to be managed unless they consent. And actually, if they've been exploited, they're unlikely to consent. So what we started this year, and I have an officer that runs this, is basically an adult triage process. And the purpose of that adult triage process is to develop a formalised joint agency process to track, triage and prevent repeat adult missing episodes. So it's a professional discussion, bring together, locate and other appropriate West Midlands Police departments and wider partners to develop a threat and risk-based assessment and agree strategies to try and start manage those individuals and prevent their repeat missing. The objectives of that are to discuss and agree actions for any adult who's been reported missing 3 times in the previous 6 months, ensure a prompt and joint response between agencies where such adults are missing, and agree ownership and progression of actions, share information about adults who are frequently missing and identify the key contacts who are best placed to discuss and help manage that individual, and discuss and agree what interventions West Midlands Police can make with their colleagues and local authorities to prevent them going missing. It is really new, it's something that we started, it's something that doesn't really exist within other forces. We have some really good now relationships with some local authorities around managing adult missing. There are some significant cases where we've managed to get involved, triage, strategy discuss and reduce those missing episodes, and in some cases even completely stop those missing episodes. And it's really useful. So it's something that's really new. We're starting to employ this process with some of the mental health establishments as well that are frequently reporting people missing. But actually, it's about understanding the risk that these people can present to themselves, to other people, and managing that risk more effectively. And on that note, that's probably me just about finished talking. I hope that I've sort of introduced you to the world of locate, in sort of 40 minutes. It's a real sort of complex world. It is groundbreaking. It is best practice seen by most forces. And I have to say the team here do a really, really good job in trying to locate people. And I suppose that takes me now to it. Anybody got any questions? Sharon, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. Just a quick question, and you might not know the answer, so I'm probably putting you on the spot a little bit. But obviously, this is sort of centred around exploitation for us. What do you think the signs would be for somebody who's going missing that we think, obviously you said there was 4 reasons why people go missing. So what should people be looking out for if they suspect somebody's going missing because they're being exploited?
I think, suddenly a frequency to start going missing when that's not seen before. It's that potentially turning back up with injuries and being missing for 2 or 3, 4 days and not being able to provide accounts to where they have been and being reluctant to provide that account. It might be they start turning up with new clothes, suddenly got a new pair of trainers and they don't really have access to funds. But actually, it's that they start off acting out of ordinary to what they normally do. But those are tend to things that, for me, when we look at county lines and looking at exploitation, it is those things. And even around sex exploitation, you start to see young girls actually turning up with a new mobile phone, with new clothes. Well, we've got an individual at the moment who's ended up having her nails done, having her hair done. She's only 15. Who is paying for that? Because her parents aren't, and where is she getting that money from? So, and actually, we know that she's been sexually exploited, and we know that somebody else is paying for those services for her. So, it's that change out of the ordinary that you've got to think is, well, actually, something's changed here. Where they're getting the money from? Why they're starting getting injured? Why they're starting being really secretive about what they're doing, and start to look and start to ask wider questions.
Okay, thank you. And obviously somebody, I don't know whether it's a bit like domestic abuse, but they say, don't they, that if somebody's been a victim of domestic abuse, they've probably been a victim a number of times before it's reported. So do you think you often find that people delay reporting their family or children missing, and they just do it when they get to a certain point that they're struggling to cope? Do you know what I mean?
Yes and no. And I think, if it's a first occasion and they've never been missed before, they tend to get reported quicker. But there are occasions where they think, oh, well, they've just gone out for 24 hours. And I'm talking adults here, 24 hours, 48 hours to clear their head. They'll be back in a couple of days. And, you know, I'm not really worried about them. Actually, that might be 2 days too late, because actually, that, you know, if they've gone out because they're in a really bad place, you know, we're 2 days behind as to where they could possibly be. 2 days is a lot to recapture and try and trace where an individual is. And again, the same with children is, oh, well, they've been missing before. They sometimes turn up overnight, or he's with his mates, and she's with her friends. And yeah, I'm not really worried about them. And sometimes, if they are, you know, subject to an interim care order, and that they're, you know, they're subject to an interim care order for a reason. And you know, there's anecdotal evidences whereby the subject of interim care orders because the mom, parents, fathers aren't reporting them missing, and actually it might be only 2-3 days down the line where a social worker's gone around and says, "Where's Mark Nevitt? Oh, well, he went out with mates a couple of days ago, he ain't come back yet," and then they get reported missing. Again, we're 2 days behind the curve. So yes, there is evidence there that people don't always get missing when reported when they should, but particularly if they're under 18, they've gone missing. We shouldn't really be delaying because we don't know what's happened to them, particularly in the world of exploitation.
That's great. And so you recommend like reporting them as early as possible, really? So
yeah, and with under 18, you've probably got to. An adult, it's about the circumstances that they're going missing. Is that 12 questions again? Realistically, is, you know, what is the factor before they've gone missing? What are the concerns? Is there any other, you know, health concerns? Is there any concerns around that they might harm themselves? Is, have they gone to clear their head, or are they at a risk to themselves or others? And it's one of those where you just got to err on the side of caution, I think.
Okay, and obviously my last question, sorry, is around like the intervention and prevention process that your team does then. So would you necessarily intervene with the family if they've only gone missing once or twice? So what's your sort of threshold as to when you do or don't get involved, or would you then hand them off to another agency?
My team normally, I said it, and a Solihull hall slightly different, and you know, if anybody's attending the meeting, that I'm going to do literally the same presentation on Thursday, is, you know, a strategy discussion for Solihull Hall will be in line with this regional strategic safeguarding and be within 24 hours, whereas other local authorities differ. So they will touch my team if they've been missing for longer than 72 hours or more than 3 periods in 90 days. But actually, what the triage has done, because we triage every single under 18 that goes missing, is actually, that's really useful, because actually it identifies, we don't just look at the compact record if Mark Nevitt's first occasion missing overnight. We'll look at any other information we've got. We'll take Mark Nevitt's triage the following day, have the local authority get anything. And actually, if there's any more concerns around there, it might be we start to get involved at that early stage. It might be that we don't need to do anything because they've been out playing football in the lake back and there's nothing else to do. And what we're trying to do now with Coventry is, where we've got those up and coming people who are just on the periphery of starting to go missing 2 or 3 times, is through what's called missing interventions meetings. So that's almost doing a return home interview meeting and a police prevention interview meeting at the same time, and doing a joint meeting with the local authority to try and understand what they're going missing, push-pull factors, and trying to reduce that at an early stage.
All right, thanks, Mark. I'll let somebody else have a go now.
Thanks. Next. Phil, was that yourself hand up, was there?
Yeah, if you could have it. I work for St Basil's, and we look after the 16 to 24-year-olds in Solihull. What I was going to say, as far as what you were saying about how you trace people on, I think it was slide 12, is there any more information that you think we could take of under 18s or even our vulnerable people that would help you in cases like this that we don't already collect as a norm, if you know what I mean?
And I suppose that age group of people tend to be really active on social media. I do a peer-to-peer review process of return home interviews and police prevention interviews with Coventry. And what happens is, and some of the data you actually see on there is, you know, have you got a social media account? Yes. Actually, what our social, you know, that social media platform is massive these days. Are you on Instagram? Are you on Snapchat? Are you on Facebook? What actually is your name on Facebook? Because it could be 30 Mark Nevitts on Facebook, but actually if you've got a different name, people don't always use their own name, is what is your name that you do use on Facebook? And it's understanding those, because very often some of these people might be still seeking help or still contacting their friends while they're missing and using those social media networks. But again, it's also just understanding, you know, where they're from, who the friends are, actually knowing where they tend to hang out, where they tend to gravitate to. Is it, you know, again, from return home interviews, you know, people put Sutton Town Centre. Well, actually, is there anywhere they go in Sutton Town Centre? Is there a pub? Is there a place? It's trying to understand what they are going, trying to understand the world that they're living and where they're going to gravitate to.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Any more questions?
Mark, there is a question in the chat just about the idea of someone who's voluntarily missing. So someone's just asking if a person has capacity to sort of decide to go out and not come back, why are they sort of still classed as missing, as voluntarily missing?
We will make that. Sometimes they're reported by a third party, and you know, if you've got, you know, exempt accommodation or support accommodation, and it's an adult and they're living there and they decide that they're going to go off and be transient, they might be reported missing by a support worker. They might be reported missing by that placement, and we get lots and lots of people like that. But actually, what we need to do actually is understand first: is it because of their transient lifestyle that they've gone, or is there other factors? And I think what we do, and when I talk about our inactives, is that's where a number of those people sit, because actually they live a transient lifestyle. They've gone off and continuously that's the lifestyle. But I've got somebody who's sitting on my system at the moment who very much a transient lifestyle. His compact record was opened and closed very shortly afterwards because he was voluntary. He was thought that he was voluntary missing. But actually, when you look at him, that person hasn't been in contact with his family, which is really out of character. And it's something that I picked up on when I got a review recently, and I spoke to the family before I did anything with it, and they were saying, no, he will always, you know, yes, he does sofa surf, yes, he does travel around, yes, he does use drugs, his lifestyle is really chaotic, but what he always does, he always speaks to mum. He's not speaking to mum, you know, he's 39 years old, he's an adult, he can do what he wants, but actually, for him not to be talking to mum is something really, really out of character. So, yes, you know, it's voluntarily decided, but actually there's a bigger issue here, is why now aren't you speaking to mum? And it might be as we do this investigation, which is still ongoing, but actually he's decided to go underground and just don't want to have contact with anybody. And actually then they've got a right to privacy, we'll leave him, and that's fine if we do find him. But actually, as if something else happened to and potentially there could be a body found that we don't know who that person is. Is it that person, that same person? Or actually, have they gone out to get themselves harm and they're, you know, deceased in an unknown location? And we have to make sure that we've bottomed that out. But there are people on our inactive system whereby they have voluntarily gone missing, and you know, the person has a right to a private life, realistically, particularly as an adult.
Thanks, I think that's really helpful. Any last questions for Mark? No? Okay, well, thank you, Mark.
I was going to say, can you hear me?
Oh.
Sorry. Hi,
yeah.
just Callum had a question in the chat. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah,
yes, I think that's the one I've just. I think that's the one I've just covered about the voluntary missing.
Oh, so sorry, I
No,
missed it at the beginning. All right, sorry.
No problem.
So I am one of the 3 leads for Locate. There's myself and the 2 DIs that cover the main investigation and missing stuff. If you've got any, you know, Rachel has and Sharon has access to my email. If you've got any questions, then please email me. But you know, my team are here to support you, particularly around missing, whether that's adults or children. Leanne Bayliss is the SPOC for Solihull. She also covers adult missing as well. I do apologise if you did attending the launch on Thursday as well, because you're going to have to listen to me going all for the same again. It was a whistle stop tour today of the way Locate works. If you do think of any questions, then please get back to me.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for that presentation. I found that really helpful to get an idea of what Locate do and what happens when someone's reported missing. And also, I think it was helpful for us to see what we can do to help you when we're making those missing person reports. Apologies to some council colleagues. I know there's widespread network issues this morning, so I know some people were struggling a bit with the sound, but anyone outside the council could seemingly hear you loud and clear, which is great. A reminder, we will share the recording of the session and the slides with everyone so that you've got the information to refer back to. And we will also send out an online feedback form to everyone, so I would really appreciate it if people could take a couple of minutes just to fill that out, because it helps us with planning for our future sessions. So that's it. That's the end of the session. Thanks again to Mark. Thanks for everyone for attending.
Rachel, if anything comes out that feedback that, well, you know, this is what I've tried to do is this is a complete new presentation for me, and I've done them before, and I've tried to cover everything. So if there's people think that the stuff there that want me to add or expand upon, or stuff that there's too much of there, let me know, because there are other local authorities that ask this and other agencies that ask for sort of presentations around Locate. So I'll be grateful for any feedback.
Yeah, of course we will. Yeah, and as Mark said, any questions that pop up after today, put those in the feedback. We can share those with Mark after the session and share their responses. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.